Now you're tapping the brakes, Ashland, into the Dan Ryan. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast with Steve Williams.
A bit of sunshine giving way to clouds today, high 54. Periods of rain, thunderstorm tonight. We could see some small hail, low tonight 43. A shower early tomorrow morning, otherwise cloudy, high 57. Rain on Easter Sunday, the high 47. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560. The Answer.
33 at O'Hare, 37 Midway, 31 in Aurora, 38 along Chicago's lakefront. Your next news update is 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning is John Cass, johncastnews.com. Also the Chicago Way podcast you find at johncastnews.com.
Thanks for getting it right, Dan. You're going to be a guest soon, I hope. So
yes.
Get the podcast right, and thanks to everyone for listening on this beautiful Good Friday to all of you.
Rui Teixeira, I mentioned him before. He writes at The Liberal Patriot. He's a left-leaning academic type who has some interesting perspectives on the Democrat Socialist Party's, careening off the rails and into the world of new Marxism. Because he comes from a perspective, he was a co-author with John Judas of The Emerging Democrat Majority that was written 20 years ago, how about demography was going to ensure that Democrats were the majority party of the 21st century. So he's a bright guy. And it's always interesting to hear and to read criticism from sort of coming with inside the ranks that is substantive. Like, things are not going well, and somebody who wants you to do well is suggesting this. It gives you perspective on where perhaps opportunities are if you're not inside that camp. He talks about this agenda he's been promoting for Democrats, this three-point plan, if you will, for more than a year, a couple of years actually. He argues Democrats must move to the center on cultural issues. That's not happening. Democrats must embrace patriotism and liberal nationalism. That's not happening per the border. And the last, which he tackles most recently, Democrats must promote an abundance agenda. Abundance means just what you think it means, he writes. More stuff, more growth, more opportunity, being able to easily afford life's necessities with a lot left over. In short, nicer, genuinely comfortable lives for all. Well, the polling is pretty clear that that's not where a majority, in some cases a supermajority of Americans are. The latest New York Times Siena poll, only 26% describe economic conditions as excellent or good, compared to 74% who say they're fair or poor. The majority of Americans have the same dim view of their personal financial situation. It is atrophying. In a Wall Street Journal poll, 57 to 31% believe the economy has gotten worse rather than better over the last 2 years. And he writes that Democrats have essentially two arguments in response to that reality, those attitudes. One is, you ungrateful wretches. Look, we have low unemployment and inflation is coming down and we're doing better and so on and so forth. You don't appreciate how good things are. That's not very persuasive. The other is future abundance is just past November because of the industrial strategy of transforming the economy with all this backdoor Green New Deal spend to stand up renewable energy projects and other sorts of, rent-seeking gambits. Problem with that is, as Teixeira writes, that future is well into the future, even if you believe that it could be realized by this approach to public policymaking, because Democrats have made things so damn hard to build in this country. So all those projects that you're underwriting are going to take exponentially longer than you're saying to deliver any potential benefits because you are so tethered to the administrative state that makes everything so difficult to produce in America. So they're in a bit of a trick bag, I'd say. And they think maybe they thought that their lawfare against President Trump was their path out, but maybe that's not so. It's not seeming to be so at this point, but again, we don't have any verdicts in either. Gerard Baker is editor-at-large of the Wall Street Journal. He's also the author of American Breakdown, Why We No Longer Trust Our Leaders and Institutions and How We Can Rebuild Confidence. Gerard Baker, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Again, thanks for having me.
Before we get to your more recent piece about the Trump trials and the political impacts, what about what Rui Teixeira is saying about where Democrats are at and sort of what they're missing in terms of their approach to persuading enough working middle-income Americans that they are still the party of abundance for them?
I completely agree with what you said about Rui. I'm like you, I don't share Rui Teixeira's broad ideological outlook, but he is absolutely right about what's gone wrong with the Democratic Party. You know, Dan, what I was as you were talking about that, I thought a lot about Joe Lieberman, who very tragically died this week, and the kind of the kind of patriotic, moderate, sensible Democrat that he was. And I knew him a little bit. I spent some time with him. He was not only a lovely man and a kind man, but he was the model of the sort of Democrat who, frankly, used to represent the country. And that's what the Democrats have lost. And by the way, of course, he was, hounded out of the Democratic Party.
Yes,
because in primary because of his views, and that's right. Teixeira is absolutely right. The Democrats have abandoned the working people of this country in favor of these ideological, this sort of, you're right, you describe it as Marxist, I sort of describe it as kind of neo-Marxist view based on identity, relating to gender and race and all of that stuff. And in the process, they have just, it's really no surprise that someone like Donald Trump comes along and does so well, because he is able to, improbable though he is as himself a billionaire, someone, from New York. He, however, despite that, manages to speak for ordinary Americans, for working class Americans, represents their values, understands their ideas and their ideals and their dreams for themselves and for their families and for the country. And the Democrats have simply abandoned that.
So now the lawfare, if they've abandoned this and they've shown no signs of following any advice from Rui Teixeira or anybody else that says that there's a course correction required. So all their eggs must be in the lawfare basket, and the prospect that if some jurisdiction, most notably Alvin Bragg in Manhattan, can convict Trump of something, no matter how frivolous and baseless it is, that they then get to spend some of that $25 million they raised with Lizzo yesterday to pound Trump as we cannot have a convicted felon in the Oval Office, and just rinse and repeat that for 6 months pending appeals, and hope that's enough to move enough in the middle to say, yeah, Biden's terrible, but we can't have a convicted felon in the White House, so I guess we have to stick with this guy.
Well, that's right. That is exactly the strategy. That has been the strategy for the last few years. But as you're kind to mention my column, I wrote in my column this week, it's not working because I think on the one hand, Republican voters are being energized by this lawfare. They do see, especially, look, we can argue about, and you and I have had conversations before, Dan. You know I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, and I think what he did after the last election was wrong. But the Alvin Bragg case, the Fani Willis case, this crazy Letitia James civil suits, the only effect they're having is they're energizing Republican voters and even a lot of moderate voters, because they can see that this is politicized justice and therefore no justice at all. And they're not having the effect on swing voters, at least as far as we can tell so far. We're still 6-7 months away from the election, so who knows? But they're not having the effect on swing voters that they're intended to vote, which is that swing voters who do have doubts about Donald Trump's character, who don't like him, because swing voters are much more concerned about the issues. They're tired, quite frankly. I think a lot of people in this country are just tired of hearing about January the 6th. They're tired of hearing about Donald Trump's misbehavior and especially whether it's to do with Stormy Daniels or supposedly inflating assets, that kind of stuff. They care about immigration, Dan and John. They care about immigration. They care about the price level. They care about the state of the world, the fact that the world seems to be falling apart around them. And they're not buying this lawfare. They're not buying this idea that they should be focused entirely on the behavior and the character of one man. They want a president who's going to work for them. And that's why I think this lawfare is not working.
I agree 100%. They see, as you say in the second paragraph of your piece, there's always been a core of Trump voters that are going to support him no matter what, and they see lawfare as an outrage, and they're going to fight it. But there also has to be a significant group of people to support Biden. And yeah. I don't know if the whole lawfare gambit raises the specter that they must change and vote against Trump. I'm talking about the independents and the Democrats. I don't see that happening.
No, I agree. I agree, John. I think that's right. I don't think they are being convinced. Look, again, people do have doubts about Trump, and I have doubts about Trump. I don't think the man has temperament and character are questionable. But right now, those are being superseded by what a genuine. This country has got real problems. The border is the biggest problem of all. Prices are a problem. Again, the decline of American power and America's ability to project its to defend its interests and to project itself around the world. That just matters more to people than the endless stuff about Trump's behavior, particularly, and this is the point also about the lawfare stuff, particularly when they can see that it's in the case of Barney Willis, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, it's Democrat prosecutors, people who were elected as Democrats, in many cases, in both the case of Letitia James and Alvin Bragg here in New York, campaigning on the basis that they were going to go after Trump. That's not, and again, people can see that's not justice.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I still worry that there's a lot of people that have sort of bought into the ends justify the means philosophy that is exhibited, I mean, by both parties to some extent, but particularly with the power structure in its current composition, not just with these prosecutors you name, but with the FBI, with intelligence agencies over the last several years, particularly since the arrival of Trump. I mean, I still don't. I mean, I understand what you're saying too about independent voters, working people. They're trying to be pragmatic. They have to look out for their homes, their household finances, and focus on the things that are most pressing in their lives. Totally understand that and appreciate that. But then there's this other sort of larger understanding of, ironically, all the norms that are being undermined by this administration, all the guardrails that are being torn down by this administration with respect to state power and the state's relationship between the citizen and government that's restrained so that people can enjoy their rights equally and simultaneously. And that to me, maybe it's too abstract, but that to me is really a pressing sort of philosophical question that needs to be answered in November.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. Now, I don't know how much attention that's going to get, but I do agree with you. That has been the hallmark of this administration, of Democrats generally, but of this administration, and whether it is on things like so-called student loan forgiveness, or some of these other measures that the administration has done, where, by the way, were completely unconstitutional and completely, as we've seen repeatedly, or some of the COVID measures they put in place, or indeed, this attempt to force social media companies, or to cooperate with social media companies to suppress free speech rights. That is a consistent theme of this administration, which I agree with you should be an important part of people's decision making when they vote in November. I don't think it's going to get the attention it deserves firstly because of this lawfare stuff, the fact that the media fixate on that, and secondly because of the other issues that I think that bread and butter issues, if you like, that do really affect people. But I do agree that's a very important feature of what we've seen in the last few years, and I think it should be I think it should be a factor.
As to the lawfare part, the people that support Trump and that the people that don't support the Democrats and the heavy presence of the state, are they going to react with anger? Is that what November's all about? Anger on that, anger against lawfare, anger against the bureaucratic class, anger against being looked down the noses from media. I think that there's a class thing going on in America. I haven't really quite figured it, but I think there's so much changes, and I think people are angry about all that.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I think that is what, again, that's one of the main reasons people voted for Trump originally in 2016. And the interesting thing for me, Dan and John, is that the Democrats have absolutely, and the media, I should say, the media too. We have to name the culprits here. The media are very much to blame. They haven't learned any lessons at all. I mean, what the reason people voted for Trump, one of the main reasons was exactly what you say, Dan. People are tired of being looked down on, tired of being dismissed. This is back to our original point about Rui Teixeira. The point of his writing is that, regular, decent, ordinary Americans have been told that their views, their values, their ideals are bigoted, have no place, told by the media that they are completely illegitimate. And along comes Trump and says, actually, no, they're not. Traditional American values are actually very good values. They're what made this country great. And the media, instead of understanding that and understanding that it was they and the Democrats and sort of the progressive institutions in this country who made people feel that way, have basically just doubled down on it. I've said, no, the more you vote for Trump, the more bigoted and ignorant and racist and sexist and everything else you are. And yeah, I think that is a big factor, a big feature of why people will vote for Trump.
Gerard Baker, editor-at-large, Wall Street Journal, author of American Breakdown, Why We No Longer Trust Our Leaders and Institutions and How We Can Rebuild Confidence. American Breakdown is Gerard Baker's book. Gerard Baker, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you both. Thanks for having me. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you, and he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at renofi.com/notices. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply stop, opt out.
John, I'm putting my foot down. We can't put off renovating this house any longer. Our kitchen is so small. We need to finish the basement for the kids, and don't even get me started